Lelina mai kako. Welcome to Keep It Aloha, a podcast that keeps it aloha by knowing that Hawaii is an illegally occupied state and has been for the last 131 years. I'm your host Kamaka, and let's get right into it because this is a mind-blowing episode. You know the usual things. Check out Patreon, check out keepitaloha.com to get the merch, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, subscribe to our YouTube channel, all that stuff. This is probably one of the most interesting episodes you'll ever listen to on the Keep It Aloha podcast. I just wish we had more time. Dr. Keanu Sai is so intelligent. His life story is super cool as well. And he's my mom's classmate. And this episode just came out like in the last couple of days. I texted him because I got his phone number from my mom. And then now he's here in the studio like a couple of days after. So this all happened very quickly. It's going to be released as a very special episode for La Hawai'i, which is basically the Hawaiian Independence Day. So listen in. I wish we had like 2 more hours to talk about all these things with him, but maybe we'll have a part 2 in the future. So enough of me speaking. Enjoy the episode. Let's introduce our guest. Support for this podcast comes from Texaco in Hawaii, which features 58 convenient locations across the state. Fueling up at Texaco is fast and easy when you use the Texaco mobile app to pay at the pump. The Texaco mobile app is a contactless way to pay for fuel so you can get in and out of the gas station quickly. Fuel your car and fuel yourself. Pick up your favorite local snacks and ice cold drinks at your neighborhood Texaco today. Texaco at Techron, driving performance. Our guest today is a PhD in political science specializing in international relations and law from the island of Oahu. He is a founding member of the Hawaiian Society of Law and Politics. He also served as lead agent for the Hawaiian Kingdom in arbitration proceedings before the Permanent Court of Arbitration at Hague, Netherlands from November 1999 to February 2001. He is also the head of the Royal Commission of Inquiry and is a senior lecturer of political science and Hawaiian studies at Windward Community College and affiliate faculty member at University of Hawaii College of Education graduate program, as well as the chairman of Hawaiian Council of Regency. I am so stoked to talk stories with him today. His name is Keanu Sai. Aloha, Keanu. Welcome to the Keep It Aloha podcast. How you doing?
Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you for coming in, making the flight over.
Oh, thanks for the invite.
Of course. I've been hearing your name so much over the last year. You are probably one of the top suggested guests to get on this podcast. So I'm happy we're making it happen. And a day after La Hawai'i air. So this will air the day after La Hawai'i air.
Good.
So we're going to talk about some good things. Yeah, I'd love to just get right into it and get to know you before we get into everything else. Because I think learning your background will be great. Where are you from? Where you grad? And what was it like growing up?
Okay, so I was born in Kapiolani Hospital on Oahu. I was raised in a valley called Kuli'o'o, just before Hawaii Kai. My family is the Reeves Ohana. So my great-grandmother, Rose Reeves, she was Hawaiian, married Charles Reeves from Tennessee, and they got 9 acres of the old homestead. This is before Hawaiian homes. So I believe must have been like 1911 or 1912. So it's something similar to the like Haula homesteads.
Okay.
Yeah. So 9 acres. My grandpa, which is Henry Keanu Reeves, had 8 brothers and sisters. One of his brothers was Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam's grandson is Keanu Reeves, the movie actor.
Oh.
So Keanu and me are named after my grandfather, Keanu Reeves.
Wow. But you guys don't know each other?
No, actually we do.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Hey.
So I'll get to that point.
Okay.
So each of the 9 children got 1 acre each. And then those children subdivided it with their children into quarter acres and then Ohana zoning. So pretty much where you live in Kuli'o'o Valley is by genealogy, right? And everybody's surrounded. We're all surrounded by cousins, and my friends were my cousins, and my cousins were all my friends. Nobody locked their door. That's how we grew up. You know, my uncle would do kalua pig for my auntie sister, Correa. She's a Reeves, but married a Correa. She had a catering business. So we had all these things that went on that we took for granted, right? So growing up in Kuli'o'o Valley, it was something that we didn't realize how unique it was.
Totally.
especially being a suburb of Honolulu, right? It was almost as if we're living in Waimanalo, and it's just you're surrounded with family. So in the valley, the cousins grew up in what is called generational gaps, right? So that was your group that you had to hang out with. But because the family was so large, I could say like my cousin Butchie Correa, which is my direct second cousin, is just a few years younger than my dad.
Oh,
right?
wow.
So
it's one of those.
So you don't know who to call auntie or uncle because it could be your cousin. But it was a safe environment, right? And I was very kolohe back then. My cousins, they know that.
Yeah.
So one day, in my family, my tutu is Rose Kikai Kuihala Simerson Reeves. So she married into the Reeves family, right? And I was the oldest grandchild. So my tutu, who lived in the back house, and we lived in the second quarter acre, it was pretty much I grew up with my tutu and my parents. So I was raised by both, right? And being the oldest grandchild, I was the alakai. I was the one that could get away with anything. My tutu took me driving when I was 9 years old. I'm driving her station wagon. She played the organ at the Holy Trinity Hawaiian Mass with Mrs. Hall. So Bobby Hall, the musician, he was with who is he with? Not Sunday Manoa, but Peter Moon Band.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So Bobby grew up in Kuli'o'o as well. So I remember my tutu would take me, and I was like I was young, 8 years old, and we'd go pick up Bobby's mom at Mrs. Hall, and then we go to Holy Trinity. And then they do the prayers and they sing Hawaiian Mass, the songs. So I remember one day my tutu tells me, and I was about 8 years old, she says, Keanu, we're gonna go and meet up with your cousin Keanu. And I said, really? Keanu? Yeah, you have a cousin named Keanu. He's from Canada. So my tutu sister-in-law was Auntie Momi, right? Who married Uncle Sam that had Keanu's dad, Sam Jr. So she brought Keanu and the sister back home to Wailupe. They had a house on that water's edge. So my tutu and I went over to go meet up with them. And that's the first time I met another guy named Keanu about my age. Wow. Right. And just kind of shook hands. And then we ended up, just playing, went out surfing. It was the first time I saw somebody put butter on their rice.
Oh, what? Is that a Canadian thing?
I don't know. But I was kind of tripping, right? But then I tasted it. It was pretty good.
Okay.
When I was in the Army, it's called grits.
Okay, yeah.
But he also was putting sugar in the poi.
Oh, okay.
And that I couldn't do.
Yeah. That's how you know he's not from here.
Yeah, that I couldn't do. So what's funny is I haven't seen him since then. So when he was promoting his movie, John Wick, the first one, and he turned 50 years old, and he and I are the same age. I think we're separated by maybe three months. Okay. Right. And he was on Jimmy Kimmel Live. So my son, Kiha, tells me, hey, Dad, Uncle Keanu's going to be on TV. So I'm downstairs. I'm watching this Jimmy Kimmel Live. And then sure enough, yeah, he's on. And then Jimmy Kimmel goes, kind of fascinated with you and your name, Keanu. I've never heard of that name Keanu before. Have you ever met another Keanu? He says, yeah, I got a cousin.
No way.
And then he says, I'm Hawaiian. We have cousins. And then he was telling him about that time we first met in Wailupe. Hey, Keanu. Hey, Keanu. So, yeah, true story.
Wow, that's super awesome. All these layers to you. I had no idea. And it's funny. So we have a lot of connections now besides, I just knew that you're my mom's classmate at Kamehameha. Yep. But I didn't realize that you're Reeves, and I went to school at Reeves as well.
Right.
We were just talking about Lorenzo, and I know a lot of the Ohanas in Kuli'o'o, Creas, Noah, and all them. So yeah, it's super cool. I didn't even realize how connected we were.
Yeah, that's the Reeves Ohana is huge.
Apparently.
And like the Correas, the Sais, they all married into the Reeves.
Yeah, and I know some Sais in Hahaione too, but I don't know if that's related to you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, that is?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what auntie, but Clayton
is
that's
Mike.
Friend. Oh, Mike, yeah.
Yeah, so Mike.
Uncle Mike.
Is uncle.
Oh my gosh, see, I had no idea. So I went to school with all these people and I had no idea.
Yeah.
That's so crazy. So you ended up going to Kamehameha, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So here's a funny story on that. So my family in Kuli'o'o were known for going to St. Louis to play football, right? So it was expected I was going to St. Louis. And if I don't get into St. Louis, then you go Damien, right? But everything was focused on football. And, football was big in our family.
Yeah.
Okay. So I remember coming home from Holy Trinity. We're walking home from Holy Trinity back home into the lane where I live, Nale Aloha. And my uncle Eddie Correa, right, is outside. And he's a retired police officer, right? And he says, "Hey, Keanu, I heard you got into Kamehameha." I said, "Yeah, uncle." He goes, "Hey, here's $100. He wrote a check for $100. Go to Kamehameha. Don't go to St. Louis." And all of his kids went to St. Louis.
How come?
I guess that's where my auntie sister wanted them to go because it was Catholic.
Oh.
Yeah, and Kamehameha is Protestant.
Okay.
Right. And we're a strong Catholic family. So that's how I got to Kamehameha.
And what age? What age did you go?
So I entered Kamehameha in 1978.
Okay.
And I graduated in 1982.
Okay. So almost like your whole career. Your high school?
High school. Yeah. Freshman to senior.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your whole high school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you enjoy it?
Oh, I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the lunches.
Yeah.
Back then, it was all you can eat.
I heard. I recently just found out about the lunches, or I've always heard stories. This mystical lunches at Kamehameha. Like they got great food. But I went to a career day last year, and then I went to the cafeteria at the Kapalama campus. They had poi. They had like different options. They got a cereal bar. They had everything.
Okay, so the food they serve at Aikahi at Kamehameha now was not the type of food that was served when me and your mom went to Kamehameha.
Was it better or worse?
Oh, to us, it was better.
Oh, okay.
Shepherd's pie, pizza, hamburger, French fries.
Yeah.
And then they went on the health kick.
Okay.
But that happened years after.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
But they still serve good food.
But I had no idea. Like people were living like this. I was like, oh, we got the 20-cent lunches at regular public school. So yeah, if I do have kids, as much as I want them to go to Hawaiian immersion, at some point I might send them to Kamehameha.
Yeah.
Because the resources and the lunch.
Yeah.
Yes. So were you classmates with my mom?
Yeah.
Or, okay. So
Class of 82.
Class of 82. Okay. You got any stories of her?
So your mom was a boarder.
Yeah.
Right?
She would fly over.
Yeah. So for me, I was pretty much football. But we knew each other as classmates, right? But my focus was football. Trying to beat St. Louis, kept losing.
Is that a nice way of saying that she was a nerd and you never hung out with her?
No. Your mom wasn't a nerd. So everybody had their cliques.
Yeah.
And they would actually, get together during parties, maybe at Sherwood's or someplace or at a graduation party.
Yeah. Okay. And so after graduating from Kamehameha, what did you end up doing?
Okay, so here's a funny story on that. So my senior year, my dad tells me, "Hey, Keanu, you going to college, huh?" And I went, "Okay." It wasn't really on the radar. I thought I was just going to get out and maybe be a police officer, a fireman, or do something, right? And he said, "We're looking at you getting a degree because you would be the first one in our family to get a degree." I said, "Okay." So I set up a meeting with the college counselor, Myron Arakawa, up at Haleakala, the building. So in that meeting, I'm sitting down with him and I say, "Hey, Mr. Arakawa, my dad said I need to go to college. Not that I want to pursue higher education. My dad said." And then he tells me, "Keanu, you should have thought about that when you was a freshman." I was like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Your grade point average is so low, you can't even get into UH. It's a 2.4. And you need a 2.75 back then to get into UH. I'm like, why didn't you guys tell me that? They probably did, but I wasn't listening because I was just focused on doing my thing, having fun, playing football, paddling, all that. And then he says, "I recommend that you join the military, get discipline. And when you're through, maybe you try a semester out at Kapiolani Community College to see if you can handle." And I didn't take that as an insult. I just went, "Okay, well, I guess I'm not going to college." So as I leave his office, waiting for me is this Command Sergeant Major Lido, right, from the ROTC program. He's a tall black guy, cool, solid, right? Everybody loves Sergeant Major Lido. But he comes up to me and says, hey, you got a problem. I said, yeah, I got to go to college. I can take care of that. And he says, you can get paid $100 a month through the ROTC program in college. And all you got to do is go to basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky after you graduate. And I got to tell you, that was the best decision made for me, not by me, because that's the only route I had to take in order to tell my dad, I'm going to pursue a degree. And Fort Knox, Kentucky, basic training, running around, C-130 coming down the strip, airborne daddy, going to take a little shot. I mean, that was full on. And I'm like 230 pounds running, you know, because I was still in good shape, but football. And after basic training, then I went to New Mexico Military Institute, like a junior West Point. And it was the first semester. They call it RAT training, recruit at training. And it's like, you got to run, you got to square your corners. When you eat dinner, your chin got to be in, and square meals. I was like, geez, and what they're trying to do is discipline you. Huh? And you might say I excelled. You know, at first I wanted to punch every guy, but you learn how to contain yourself. But the one story from that time I was there was we put together a Hawaiian club. So Hawaiians would all get together. And this was everybody from Hawaii, not just native Hawaiians, just a club, right? And this one Sergeant Major Bach, okay, tall, Ranger, black beret, hefty. He's like 6'4", and he would inspect our rooms. And when he comes into my room, he's ripping that place apart. My DVDs were not folded the way it's supposed to. My what do you call it? The blanket and the sheet was not tight, so he rips it off. And while he's doing that, you got to be against the wall with your chin in, looking straight ahead.
Dang.
And he was just on me, on all the native Hawaiians, right? And he was just like, you wanted to kill him. You know, like, but you got to be disciplined because it's part of that game, right? So at the our second year, when we graduate, and this was an accelerated military science program. Military science 1, 2, 3, and 4 compiled into from 4 years to 2 years because they needed officers, right, in the Army. He would be the first one to be sure that he saluted us after we got our commission, because the first person that you get a salute from, that person has to give you a silver dollar. That's a custom that we found out. So Sergeant Bach made sure he did that to all the Hawaiians, right? So at the graduation party, we had a travel lodge across, kegs and everything. He tells us why he was so hard on us. Because in Vietnam, it was only the Hawaiians that he knew would cover his back and protect them. And he said, you guys had to live up to that standard that others came from Hawaii. And I was like, wow. I wish you told us from the beginning, because I hated you for 2 years.
But I guess that's one of those things where, you know, if he told you, it would have been totally different, right?
Exactly.
That's crazy. Going back to, because you mentioned like you got to eat square or something.
Yeah.
Is that where like the square meals came from?
Yeah, I guess so.
I guess it just clicked in my head because I've heard that before, like the 3 square meals or something.
I don't know if it came from the military square meals, but the reason why it's called you got to eat square meal, like where you have to scoop it, like you're looking straight ahead. You can't look down. Scoop it, pull it up like this, eat it, pull it forward and drop it and chew.
Is there a reason for that, or it's just because of discipline?
Just harassment.
Yeah. So they just do that to test you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
So that pressure is to see if you're going to break.
Yeah.
You're going to snap, right? Because the training to become a commissioned officer, you're going to have to make decisions where people might die. But they incrementally put things in place like building blocks, right? So I was going through that. And then I also was playing football up there for the junior college football team.
What position?
Nose guard.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're going to give me a scholarship, right? And this was during Christmas break. This is December of 82. right? And then I'm watching on TV, getting ready to meet up with some cousins, and they dropped the football program. I was like, I was going to get a scholarship. Okay. So I came back from Christmas break and I needed to get into some sport so I don't have to keep walking around with a rifle. I mean, I was entertaining ping pong, badminton, whatever. And I remember a class above me. He went to Damien and his name was Marty O'Brien.
Mm-hmm.
So Marty actually fought for the Irish national team in the Olympics. Okay. But he's from Hawaii, but his dad is Irish. So that's why he had that Irish nationality. And he comes up to me and he says, "Hey, Keanu, you know a fighter?" I was like, "Oh, nobody ever asked me if I knew how to fight, but have I been in fights?" "Oh, yeah." High school, just rush. You know. Yeah. He says, "Hey, we're looking for an heavyweight." And I said, "Oh, okay. I'll try it," because I was looking for a sport. So I ended up losing so much pounds. I went from 230 down to 178. So I ended up fighting light heavyweight.
Wow.
And I ran the 2 miles in 12 minutes, 30 seconds.
Oh.
That's like gazelle speed.
Yeah.
But that was just from the training. So I was able to get a boxing scholarship for boxing.
So random.
so that really helped my parents a lot.
Okay.
But the military training and then also the boxing training, a lot of it is discipline, right? So when you're in the ring, only you can answer to you screwing up. It's not like football. You can blame 10 other guys.
Yeah. You should have caught that. You should have blocked that guy. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But your football background probably gave you a lot of the discipline, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because my sports background is a lot of the reason why I'm so disciplined.
Yeah.
And I believe that. So you did that. And then after finishing that whole program, what did you end up doing? How did you get into like the whole, Hawaiian, I don't even know what to call it, nationalism? What do you call it? The movement? Patriotism?
Yeah.
Hawaiian patriotism?
Hawaiian patriotism.
That's funny because I never thought we had patriotism in Hawaii. Towards like, you see Americans, right? They have strong patriotism. I feel like we're always pride, but I've always affiliated patriotism with being American.
Oh.
Not so much like Hawaiian.
Yeah. Back in 1893, you had an organization in response to the overthrow called Hui Aloha Aina, which is the Hawaiian Patriotic League. And Joseph Navahi was the president of that organization, which the namesake is for Navahi School. Yeah.
That's
so Aloha Aina is patriot.
Oh.
Yeah. So I'm a patriot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
A newly discovered patriot because I didn't know about this side.
Yes.
Yeah. So while I'm at New Mexico military, before I'm graduating, I'm going to graduate with my commission as a second lieutenant. I signed a contract, 3 years active duty, 3 years reserve, and then an associate's degree in pre-business. So maybe a month before I'm going to graduate, I get a call from my mom, and she tells me that my tutu got cancer and that she is in my uncle's house next door, where one of the rooms was converted into a hospice room. And she had, I believe, lung cancer. So my tutu told my mom to tell me that she won't die until I come home. And also that my Uncle Johnny Joe won't die, but he was in a VA hospital, I think in Washington, but he didn't make it home in time. He was major suffering from PTSD, Vietnam. He was a Vietnam vet, right? So when I came home, I'm going to transfer to University of Hawaii to get my bachelor's so that, I can continue to fulfill my contract, 3 years active duty, 3 years reserve. So when I came home, I joined the Hawaii Army National Guard to begin to fulfill that 3 years reserve requirement, right? First, the 487 Field Artillery. And then all my tutu wanted me to do was to sit down with her and just listen to her stories, right? And she would never let anybody in except for me. And she would make sure I closed the door. So my uncles and aunties were always outside, right? And my tutu was sharing with me some unbelievable stories. It wasn't the tutu that I grew up with. My tutu was very meek, very humble, strong though, right? She had to raise 9 children on her own because her husband, my papa, Henry Keanu, passed away when my mom was only 12 years old. And she was the second oldest. So the story she was telling me was mind-blowing. She was born in 1910, okay? And she started to talk about stories, but the way she talked about it was more like she was reliving it. It was more like an experience she was reliving. Because the way she was talking, it was different. Like at some point, she sounded like she was a child talking, right? So one story that she was sharing that stood out for me was Uncle Paneco, who I knew as an older uncle, always came to visit. He got dirty lickings because he didn't properly bow to the prince. That's what my tutu is telling me. And I was like, okay, tutu, who's the prince? Do we have an uncle named Prince? There's no Prince Kuhio. I went, what? What is she doing in the house? But that's my dad's good friend. And then she just goes on to another story, almost like it's nothing. And the stories thereafter was just like amazing. I didn't know how to take it. I was just enthralled, just listening. And then when it's Paul, I go outside and my mom, my uncles, my aunties, what did Ma say? So I started to explain. And they said, oh, it must be the morphine, for the pain. She said, no, she was pretty lucid. She was spot on. But nobody really understood what was going on. So before my tutu passed, maybe a month before she passed, she made me promise her that I would know my genealogy. Because she said, Keanu, when you know your genealogy, you will know who you are and what you need to do. Okay, tutu. Now, back then, I'm just full on military, and I got to get my bachelor's degree. So my tutu passed. I took the route to get a degree in sociology. As soon as I graduated, I didn't even walk for graduation. I headed straight to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, go through officer's basic course to get branch qualified field artillery. And I had already been in the Guard at that time. I was at for 3 years, right? So that really set me on a course of military. And I loved it, right? Loved it big time. And it wasn't like I was doing it because I was an American. I did it because my uncle was in Vietnam. So when I saw the fatigues and everything and his jungle boots, it's almost like something, that's what I want to do. But I didn't know the particulars of my uncle being drafted, the PTSD, the drugs, all that stuff. But I just wanted to be in the Army, like my family. So it gets to a point where 1992, I didn't fulfill my tutu's request to me that I need to know my genealogy. And that's when I got focused. And I went, okay, I got to know my genealogy. Where do I start? So I heard that the archives on the palace grounds, they help Hawaiians do their genealogy for Hawaiian homes to get started. And I went there and I said, hey, I don't want to apply for Hawaiian homes, but I want to know, how do I begin to learn my genealogy? Where do I start? I had no idea. So they said, the first thing to do, why don't you go look at this book, which was on the shelf. And it was a paperback book, and it was genealogies printed in newspapers. And this book was published 1980s. Edith Mackenzie gathered all these newspapers and reprinted them from Hawaiian newspapers. So I pulled one out, and I went to the index, and I went to the name Simerson, because that's my tutu's maiden name. So that's an unfamiliar name, right? Not everybody knows Simerson, right? And when I went to the index and I saw Simerson, I went, hey, it's right here. Page 58. Turned to page 58. It said Mo'okua Hawali'i, genealogy of nobility. Huh? And then it started with Liloa from the 15th century, king of Hawaii Island. And it went all the way to my great-grandfather when he was 16 years old in 1896, naming him, his brother Isaac, and his sister Rose. And I was like, that's my tutu's dad. That's who my tutu was talking about. So I wanted to know who he was. I never had a picture of him. My tutu didn't have a picture of him. So I looked through the census reports, and I found a census report. This was, I think, maybe 1913. So my tutu was she was 3 years old at that time. So they lived in Kalihi, adjacent to Auld Lane. Forgot the specific name of that street. And as I'm looking at the family household, it's listing my great-grandparents, their names, my great-grandmother's brother, that's the Pahau side of the family, and then my tutu as an infant, and then they had a Japanese name. I was like, what is that? It was a Japanese name that started with an S. So I looked next to occupation. It said servant.
Oh.
I was like, what the hell is this? Had no idea.
Wow.
From me knowing my tutu when she was alive. And that just got me so revved up to just dive into it. And in the Army, we call it gather intel. And I was just gathering as much intel as I could just to understand who these people were. So then I found out that my great-grandfather, William Kuakini Simerson, was one of the 14 pallbearers of Prince Kuio's casket and Queen Lili Ukalani's casket. And in the state funeral newspaper, it says these were the 14 high-ranking chiefs of the kingdom. Unbelievable. It was like a whole new world was opening up for me. And I had a personal stake in it because that's my great-grandfather. That's my tutu. That's going back to Liloa, right? So I began to look at how the government operated, where did they work, who were the great-great-grandparents. And I quickly realized that everything that I was taught at the university and at Kamehameha schools regarding the Hawaiian Kingdom era was all wrong. The idea that the missionaries controlled everything, you couldn't find that. They controlled it after 1893. And on top of that, they weren't missionaries. They were descendants of missionaries. They were lawyers, businessmen, right? They weren't missionaries, right? So naturally, the aha moment for me came when I began to look into 1893 and what happened, the invasion, right? So I'm reading the Blunt report, right? He's a special commissioner appointed by President Cleveland to investigate the overthrow. So he's in Hawaii. He arrived in Hawaii just prior to April 1st, 1893. He started his investigation April 1st. So I'm looking at all these documents, like government reports, not newspapers and people saying this. No, I'm looking at government reports. And then President Cleveland's message to the Congress in 1893, December 18, concluding what he found. So that's what I'm looking at. And then my aha moment was, this is exactly what Saddam Hussein did when he invaded Kuwait in the first Gulf War in 1990. So Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait and he sent the Kuwaiti government into exile. And 1 week later, he annexed Kuwait, called it the 19th province of Iraq. Now, in 1990, when that was going on, I was at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, going through officers advanced course as a captain. And we're going through battle training and staff training, right? So we're getting live intel coming in from Iraq because some of us could be activated to go into that theater. So we're taking this information dead seriously. And everybody knew, and Army regulations show, if you overthrew the government, you don't have the sovereignty of that country. That's called occupation. And you have to temporarily administer the laws of the occupied state until you get a treaty of peace. That's in Army Regulations, Field Manual 27-10 and 27-5. It's all there. So that's what we understood. So when I looked at Hawaii, I'm like, wait a minute. What was overthrown was the government, not the country, and we're occupied. So how did Hawaii become a part of the United States? Oh, I found out that in 1898, Congress passed a law annexing Hawaii, saying, you're ours. That's exactly what Saddam Hussein did in 1990. He passed a law from Baghdad saying Kuwait is the 19th province. And that was my OMG, WTF, because I'm in the Army.
Yeah.
And I'm going, hey, wait a minute, am I in the right Army?
So did you have this like internal conflict of like, I'm here serving the American government, yet they're the ones that kind of screwed us over?
No.
Okay.
Because I was an Army officer. So we deal with We were trained to deal with any situation.
Okay.
No task is daunting. That's how we were trained. And I just went, okay, WTF, got it. I just got to get more intel.
Mm-hmm.
So any questions I had, I looked for more answers.
Yeah.
And that is what we call in the Army the estimate process on how you can come to a decision. So I hadn't come to a decision, but I came to realize there's more answers that I need to seek because these questions will affect me directly.
Mm-hmm.
And this had nothing to do with the sovereignty movement.
Mm-hmm.
This was just me being a battery commander, Charlie Battery, 1st of the 487 Field Artillery, M102s, 105 howitzers. And I loved it, right?
So you had no interest in this before?
No.
It all came up to your tutu stories, military, and you just started to make all these connections and you're like, I got to do something about it because nobody else is doing anything about it.
It became personal.
Mm-hmm.
It totally became personal. And what I began to realize was I had the training as a military officer to deal with this type of situation because we're occupied. Mm-hmm. And we had the field manuals to follow. We had the precedents that I could look at from other situations. So give you an example. So when the Japanese signed the Treaty of Surrender on the USS Missouri in 1945, I believe it was September, that did not end the war. That only ceased hostilities, right? As soon as that was signed, that surrender, it moved into the next phase of the war called occupation. And that is when General MacArthur took over, according to Army regulations and international law, the civilian government of Japan. The civilians stayed there, but the head was replaced by MacArthur, called the military governor. And he would continue to administer Japanese law and implement the terms of the Treaty of Surrender until they get a treaty of peace, which would bring the war to an end and the occupation. And that occurred in 1952 when the Treaty of San Francisco came into effect, which was the Treaty of Peace. And that's when MacArthur transferred the authority from him as a military governor to the prime minister of Japan, and the occupation ended. Mm-hmm. That's what's supposed to have happened here, right? But it didn't.
Why is that?
President Cleveland wanted to restore the Queen. He actually entered into a treaty with her to restore her back to her authority, right? But people in Congress prevented Cleveland from carrying it out because they were eyeing Pearl Harbor from the beginning. Mm-hmm. This whole issue about American military presence here and the American presence was for military purposes.
Yeah, that's what I hear. So all the overthrow, everything, the American government was just because they wanted. Hawaii was like a perfect place for military to control, right? The Pacific.
Right. So what they wanted was Hawaii to be a base to protect the west coast of the United States. That's in the records. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then Hawaii just got sucked into this vacuum of power and warmongering. Mm-hmm. And in order to hide this reality, the United States administration, through the territory of Hawaii in 1906, began a formal policy of denationalization. So they need to conceal the illegality. So if you look at the newspapers prior to 1898, prior to, I would say, 1930s, the adults, they all knew that Hawaii is occupied. They killed the Treaty of Annexation, the Ku'e petition. They all knew. So their minds could not be changed. But denationalization is actually a war crime where it is a move to obliterate the national consciousness in the minds of school children, not adults.
So that's why they banned the language and started to...
Banning the language in the schools was part of that policy to Americanize. Mm-hmm. So not necessarily to ban the language, but you have to speak English. Mm-hmm. That was the approach. All you learned was American history. That was my tutu's generation. Mm-hmm. That's all. And if you didn't follow that, you get disciplined. Mm-hmm. And if you are not a good American, you don't go to high school.
Total assimilation, like Native American kind.
The difference with Native Americans and Hawaiians here, when you do that to school children during an occupation situation scenario, right, between two independent states under international law, that's a war crime.
Mm-hmm.
But when you do that to Native Americans, right, or Native tribes in Canada, which we've heard a lot about, forced assimilation,
Mm-hmm.
right, forcing them to not be tribal anymore, right? The question there would be under Canadian law or American law, not international law.
Mm-hmm.
And then later comes to be known as a violation of civil rights, but those things that they did back then, they weren't held accountable to it because they didn't have the means or the laws that apply until much later. So now you start to see where the Pope comes out and apologizes, right? But in the case of an international situation between two independent states, that's a war crime.
So Hawaii was considered international because it wasn't a part of anything. It was an independent nation.
So Hawaii became an independent state on November 28, 1843, when Great Britain and France jointly recognized the Hawaiian Kingdom as an independent
state. That's when we got the flag with the Union Jack and stuff?
Okay, let me back up then. Okay, so our ties are not to America.
Mm-hmm.
We have more ties to Britain, right? So when Captain Cook came here to map the Pacific, right, he made a bad decision. He tried to take Colonial Pu'u hostage. You don't do that to try to ransom your schooner back, right?
Yeah.
And that created a difficult situation, and he was killed. Okay? So my fourth great grandfather was actually one of the chiefs that killed him, Kanaina. So his Kanaina is his chiefly name, but his name that he was born was Kalanimano Okaho'owaha. So that's a pretty powerful name right there.
Super cool.
So Captain, so Weber, he has the drawings, right? Mm-hmm. So he has the drawings of, Weber's the artist on Captain Cook's ship. And you see the Va'akaulua going across, and you see people paddling with the mask on, right? You also remember the picture that he drew of that chief that had the mahi'ole, right? That's Kanaina.
Oh, okay.
And he got killed from musket fire by the British after Captain Cook was killed, right? But it was a bad decision, but the connection was still to the British. So when Captain Vancouver came back to follow up where Captain Cook left off, Captain Vancouver befriended Kamehameha. He was trying to befriend a lot of the kings, like Kahikili, Kaeo, but it focused on Kamehameha. He built a relationship with them. And in 1794, Kamehameha and his chiefs all agreed they would become a British protectorate. So they became British subjects. So that's when the Union Jack with the red background, the flag, was the flag of the Hawaiian Kingdom. In 1810, Kamehameha I, still a part of the British, came up with the flag that has the stripes. But you still have that Union Jack there, right? Which eventually came to be known as the flag that we see today. That's British origin. That's not American, right? So that flag became the national flag of the Hawaiian Kingdom. When the overthrow occurred in 1893, these insurgents were trying to give the image that they were just the successor of the country, so they kept the same flag, and it continued till today. So that's where that Union Jack came from.
Yeah, that's awesome. I knew it was because of relations with the British, but I didn't know in depth the details.
Yeah.
And since we're on the topic of flags, the red, green, and yellow flag, which some people think is like the original Hawaiian flag, that was just more of a movement kind of flag, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I know the guy who made it.
Yeah. So that's just like how would you explain it? It's not a real flag. It's just like
well, it's a real flag.
Yeah.
I mean, it's there, but it has no connection to the Hawaiian Kingdom.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So, okay, let's start from the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom to now. Okay, so 1893 overthrown, 1898 annexed. We became a territory, we became a state, and then the Hawaiian Renaissance begins in like the 70s.
Right.
Where do you stand with all of this, like nationalism? What would you consider your nationality to be?
Right. So the term nationalism is a loaded word. So nationalism is tied to a particular ethnic group or culture that pushes superiority, right? So that's why it's called white nationalism.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In Germany, Nazis, the Aryan race, Aryanism, right? So it's always excluding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Patriotism is love of country, not love of a culture,
Mm-hmm.
not love of an identity within the country. But patriotism speaks to the love of the country and what you would do for that country to protect it, right? So the term patriotism began to be incorporated into the Hawaiian newspapers. And my cousin Kaui found this out,
Mm-hmm.
and her son, Hilinai, my nephew. And they realized that it was taken from a story regarding a person regarding Italy in the 1860s, I believe, because Italy was going through they needed to consolidate all the different kingdoms into one Italy, right? And I forgot the name of that one person, but a very well-known person. And he was known as an Italian patriot. And that's when you start to see the formation of that term Aloha Aina,
Mm-hmm.
which never existed before then.
Mm-hmm.
So they drew it from that idea of patriotism, right? So when you look at that aspect of a particular race or culture and Hawaiian nationalism, it's a divisive matter because it pertains to natives and those who want to help the natives, but it's the natives that control this.
Mm-hmm.
Only natives can speak Hawaiian. Only natives can teach or be an instructor in Hawaiian at the university or whatever. That is an extension of what would be called Hawaiian nationalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let me kind of put that in context, though, because I don't want to make it sound as if this was a deliberate move to be separate and against, right? So let's take a look at what happened since the denationalization policy was implemented in 1906 as a formal policy throughout all the schools, public and private. So within 3 generations, from my tutu to my parents to me, white clean. We didn't know anything. I was at Kamehameha schools. I had no idea anything about the Hawaiian Kingdom.
Was that intentional on their part?
Yeah.
It was.
Because the purpose of denationalization is to obliterate the national consciousness in the minds of school children.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can remove that national consciousness, then you can control them. See, they don't think patriotism.
Mm-hmm.
They don't think Aloha Aina because they don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
But their parents do. Mm-hmm. So now as these children, like my tutu, is coming home, the parents are watching what's happening and they have to make decisions. They can't speak. We're not going to speak to them. You be a good American. Just do that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you have the elders, the kupuna, still talking because that's the national language. It's not like they're speaking the native language, the tribal language. It's the language of the country, right? They were bilingual, okay? Mm-hmm. But within 3 generations, it's complete. Mm-hmm. So when you start to get into the 1960s, it's also a part of what's happening throughout the United States and the world. So what's going on throughout the world is decolonization. So former empires, the French, the British, the Dutch, their former colonies are becoming independent states. Mm-hmm. Indonesia, Malaysia, Algeria, right? Rwanda, Belgian colony. So you have fighting, right? And that move of decolonization is fighting for rights against an oppressor, a colonizer. Mm-hmm. Also going on in the United States at the same time was civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, the Black Panther movement. Mm-hmm. Native Alaskans were getting land back, right? So American Indian movement was taking place. So for Hawaiians who have already been indoctrinated into believing something that's not true, are trying to find something. So I would like to say that the one to be credited for the Hawaiian Renaissance, meaning the awakening mm-hmm. from the 1960s, was John Dominus Holt. And John Dominus Holt wrote a response to be published in the newspaper that said Native Hawaiians are not lazy. We're not dumb, right? And the newspaper refused to print it. So he ended up printing a book called On Being Hawaiian. And then he was saying how we are yearning for our culture. And it was like expressing our thirst. But we're not bad. We're not lazy. But see, that was part of that denationalization, because that's how you control everybody. And most Native Hawaiians never went past the 8th grade. So my grandpa on my dad's side, he ended up working when he finished the 8th grade. He couldn't go to high school. So by the time it gets to the 1960s, a lot of these things are being entrenched already. And all they're looking around is American Indian movement, the Maoris in New Zealand, Kohangareo, right? Franz Fanon, Algeria, Revolution, French. It was feeding these ideas of wanting more. And that eventually started more of the cultural movement on being Hawaiian. So Eddie Kamai and the Sons of Hawaii playing music that was never played before that way, right? You have Sunday Manoa, right? And then that idea of culture is coming back, just trying to hold on to it. But we're still grabbing onto things we don't yet fully understand. So I'll give you an example. You ever saw the picture of the muscular pictures of Hawaiian men with a malo, and they have a helmet on his head, right? And he said, that's the Hawaiian warrior. Okay, I remember seeing a picture of that from the 1970s. And it was a Hawaiian guy with a malo, and he had the helmet on, and everybody was calling it a warrior's helmet. You'd be crazy as a warrior to put a gourd on your head. It's not a Kevlar, right? And if you turn real quick, guess what? It doesn't turn with you. There's no chin strap. It was a mask. It was the mask that was used to conceal the priests of Ku Kaili Moku during the time of Lono. Because that's why when it's Lono time, the season of Lono, when the Makali'i rises, that is when figuratively Ku Kaili Moku or Kaili leaves. And then when the Lono season ends, right, when the Pleiades sets, Ku, the war god, comes back. And what signifies his return, and Kamehameha would show this, as he had to, he would have to go out on the canoe, come in, land on the shoreline, and he gets hit with the barrage of spears trying to kill him. And he has to fend off the spears and drive off those warriors because he is supposed to be the embodiment of Ku Kaili Moku. When he does that, all the priests go, Ku has come back, Hemo, the mask. But yet during the 1970s, we're still trying to find these things.
Yeah.
And still you see that.
Even till today.
Till today.
We're grasping for an identity.
Exactly. So, but that is a byproduct of yearning because we didn't know. So it's not an excuse, but it's an explanation.
Totally. And it makes so much sense because we see that even through social media and these little movements going on with the sovereignty movement and, Hawaiian language movement and people moving here, trying to get into Hawaiian culture, reclaim their identity. We talk about it all the time, and it seems like we are just scratching and grasping for whatever we can. You see people who are just like, they would just start to cling to any ideology that they see, especially if they're like not from here. They see somebody like getting super radical, like we are Hawaiian, we're not American. Okay, I'm gonna go with these people because that's like the most Hawaiian stuff, and not even really knowing the full extent of it.
Right.
I see that all the time.
Right. In poli-sci, we call that rhetoric. So it's the art of convincing.
Okay, what is it like? Also like cognitive dissonance?
No, it's called confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias.
Yeah. So you already have a bias. And your algorithm on your social media is only going to feed you information that confirms that bias that you already have.
Yeah.
So all it does is reinforce the bias. And that bias, that reinforcement of the bias tends to create tribes.
Yeah.
And then you have tribalism. Yeah. Now tribes are going against each other, but it's all ideology. And it's like nobody's talking to each other.
Yeah. And that's what creates the echo chambers on social media.
Yeah.
Trust me, I see it. And I'm sure you probably get some pushback on your ideologies too, because not everybody likes to listen. They listen to respond. They don't listen to understand.
Right.
And you're coming with facts. You're coming with a doctorate, with information, with intel that you've gathered over all these years. And a lot of people are coming with emotion and oh, I heard this, oh, I heard that. I feel like that's what goes on with a lot of these movements. And I've met people through that are part of this sovereign movement. And there's like 4 different sovereign groups. They're all trying to fight for the same thing, but they want the power. You're not part of any of those movements, right?
No.
So what's the difference between you and them?
Okay, so let's go back to what is sovereignty,
Mhm.
right? So let's define sovereignty. So sovereignty is an international term. So that's why you refer to countries as sovereign and independent states. So that's the term that is used that refers to a country that exists independently of other countries.
Okay, so sovereignty and independence is the same thing.
Okay, so sovereignty is supreme authority over your territory.
Okay.
Independence means that it exists independent of other sovereignties over other territories.
Okay.
So that means only you have sovereignty over that territory and not other countries, but you got to be independent. So you can be a state and not be independent because you have different laws that are applying there, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's use 1783, the end of the American Revolution. You have 13 former colonies that now King George III explicitly recognizes in Article 1 of the Treaty of Peace, Treaty of Paris, 1783, recognizes the 13 colonies as now 13 independent states. That's what it says, 13 independent states. What that means is these states are independent of each other, but they're in a loose union called a confederation, right? Like the European Union, okay? France, Great Britain, they're still countries, but they're in a loose union for economic purposes. These guys in the United States are in a loose union for defense, to protect each other, right? Now, from 1783 until 1789, for 6 years, only Pennsylvania law applied in Pennsylvania. Only Georgia law applied in Georgia, right? Only Massachusetts law applied in Massachusetts because they were independent of each other. There was no overarching federal law. 1789, the 13 independent states agreed to transform themselves into a federation from a confederation. So when they created the federation, all 13 gave up their independence to the federal government and reserved certain rights of sovereignty of their own. But they gave up what needed to be given up for a federal government. After 1789, Pennsylvania was no longer an independent state. Neither was New York. They were just called a state, right? The United States of America was the independent state under international law. And why New York was no longer considered a state after an independent state after 1789, because you had 2 types of laws in New York law and federal law that was passed by the U.S. Congress outside of New York territory. That is an indication that they're not independent. So for the Hawaiian Kingdom, we were an independent state since 1843. Only Hawaiian law applies over our territory, just like only American law applies over American territory, and Mexican law only applies over Mexican territory. So that means that the country is sovereign and independent. So that's the basis for international law. You have to be an independent state to be a part of that system.
Okay. So I thought states were just only related to America, the U.S., United States of America. So states are everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So what's the difference between a state and a country? Because I thought Hawaii was like a independent country or nation, or what's the difference between all those?
Okay, so in the past, they would refer to countries as nation states.
Okay.
Right? But
It's even more confusing.
So you have nation states in the past being referred to as countries.
Okay.
Eventually, by, I would say, the latter part of the 19th century, 1800s, they dropped nation because nation applies to a particular ethnic group.
Okay.
Right? National identity. So like England, that's a nation state. But how do you explain Ireland is now part of Great Britain, Scotland is part of Great Britain, and Welsh? Okay, so they dropped the nation state, they just called it state. So state just means country.
Okay.
Yeah, so today, when you say an independent state, it's a country. But if you're not an independent state, you're like the state of New Mexico. Then you're just a state that exists within an independent state called the United States of America.
Okay. So for example, South America, Paraguay, Uruguay, Argentina, they're all state.
Right.
But we know them as countries.
Yeah.
But they also in the same, like if we had like a Venn diagram, it would be like, okay.
But in the case of Mexico,
okay,
they have states too, like America. Actually, it's called the United States of Mexico.
Okay.
So like the state of Chihuahua
Mm-hmm.
in Mexico, that's a state, but not an independent state.
Okay.
So Chihuahua is like New York.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. I had no idea. I wonder if I learned this in school and I just didn't pay attention.
We teach it in poli-sci, UH.
Okay, so maybe it's not really a high school course. It's maybe more of a college course. Okay. All right. So what are you working on right now? What is your biggest goal?
Okay. So let me kind of just bring this to a close with regard to I'm not part of the sovereignty movement, right? So the cornerstone of international law is state sovereignty, okay? That is the cornerstone of international law. So when you have a state and the sovereignty of that state is supreme authority, you need a government to exercise that authority, right? But a state is more like it's called a juridical or legal person, right? A government is a physical being. Okay, so how do I explain this? So a legal person would be a corporation. It's on paper. You cannot grab Bank of Hawaii. I can't touch it, but I can see it in the Articles of Incorporation. This is a business. And it has a board of directors with the CEO. That's the governing body.
Okay.
So that governing body speaks on behalf of the legal person that can't speak on its own. Because it's a legal person, not a physical person with a mouth.
Yeah,
right.
You can go online, you can look it up. It's legit.
Yeah. Now, when COVID hit, and let's say for 3 months, nobody showed up to work for Bank of Hawaii as far as the board of directors and the CEO, that doesn't mean Bank of Hawaii ceases to exist. It's still a legal person, but it can't talk. You don't have the CEO there. So what you have there is you can remove the governing apparatus, but it doesn't affect the legal person. It's still there. Okay. That same concept applies to countries which are called independent states. So independent states have governments that exercise their authority, whether that government is democratic, autocratic, communist, whatever. Whatever that government is, it's geopolitical. It's a creation of that area's geographically, its political history, right, into what they are now. But the country just has 4 qualities: defined borders, people in it, a government in it, and the ability to enter into foreign relations. So every state has those elements, but not every state has the same kind of government. All government differs. That's why it's called geopolitical, right? So under international law, when you go to war, war is considered legal under international law. It's regulated. And if you violate the laws of war, then you have what is called war crimes, right? But it's still a part of international law. The purpose of an invasion between 2 warring countries is to overthrow the other government, to stop the hostilities, get a treaty of surrender. But by getting the treaty of surrender and overthrowing that government, that didn't mean you affected the country and its sovereignty. It still exists. But by overthrowing that government, you are now responsible under the laws of war to be that temporary government to continue to administer the laws of the occupied state. So you don't create chaos economically, right? Migrations. You try to maintain that until you get a treaty of peace. Now, whether or not that treaty of peace will eventually transfer the territory of that country to the conqueror, or bring the occupation to an end, like in the case of Japan and Germany after World War II, right? But either way, sovereignty wasn't affected. It's still part of the state.
We've always been sovereign.
Only our government was overthrown. The ability to exercise that authority. That's why after our government was overthrown in 1893 by the U.S. Marines, right? They carried that responsibility that existed under international law at that time, as it does now, to temporarily administer Hawaiian Kingdom law until you get a treaty of peace. so this place doesn't blow up into chaos.
Yeah.
You got to maintain the economy. You got trade agreements with other countries. That's why you're supposed to administer the laws of the occupied state.
Yeah. So in business terms, the CEO got booted.
Right.
The business is still going.
It's because it's on paper.
Mm-hmm.
It's an LLC, might be a corporation. Yeah.
And there's so that business still has a bunch of rules and regulations that you have to follow and abide by. But somebody's coming in who has no authority to do all this and telling everybody, this is how it's done now.
Right. And the thing is, by doing that, they violated the rules, and those violations could constitute war crimes.
And you have a letter that you put out recently with all these war crimes like listed, right?
Okay, so before we get to that point, I got to build up to that.
Okay, because I have it pulled up, and I'm going to read all the war crimes that there. Yeah, and I'm keeping track of time, so you're good.
No, I just want to make sure I have enough time to share this.
We might have to have you back.
Okay, so that's why I work with people, and we are not part of the sovereignty movement because we're not trying to get sovereignty. The sovereignty is still in the country, period. So this is not about getting something that already exists, but then also the sovereignty movement is based on what is called Hawaiian nationalism, which is very exclusive and native oriented. That has nothing to do with the Hawaiian Kingdom and international law and actually how things work. But it's a byproduct of being brainwashed into believing something that's not true. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter what they're doing because it has no basis. But for us, it does matter what we do, because if we violate the rules as the United States has violated, then we ourselves can be held accountable. So it's that standard of what we call rule of law. So before you start to play this game of law, law is like a sword. Make sure you hold the handle and not the blade, because you'll get cut. So we have to make sure our hands are not on the blade. We got to make sure it's on the handle and we have a good grip. But before we could get to that point, we needed to come up with a plan to address this monolith of brainwashing, right? So in 1994, I came to the realization that I needed to resign from the Army as a commissioned officer. So I was in for 10 years. 4 years was volunteer. I did my 3 years active, 3 years active, 3 years reserve. Okay, that was done. And we took deliberate steps to restore the government of the Hawaiian Kingdom that was illegally overthrown in 1893. And we're going to follow the precedents of what happened in Belgium. So when the Germans invaded Belgium, they captured King Leopold during World War II. Belgians fled and they went to London and they formed a government in exile, but they had to form it under their laws that existed before the German invasion. And in their laws, it has a provision, because they're a constitutional monarchy, that the cabinet of ministers can become a council of regency serving in the absence of the monarch, right? That's a provision in their constitution. We have it in our constitution, Article 33. So the ministers, Minister of Finance, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Attorney General, and the Minister of the Interior are 4 ministers called the cabinet under Hawaiian law. They can become a council of regency serving in the absence of the monarch, which is Queen Liliuokalani, the last monarch. So we came up with a plan to assume the chain of command in a particular way, very legal, to become an acting council of regency, serving in the absence of the monarch, but by necessity. So it's something we would do in the Army a lot. A private can become a lieutenant in time of war, because if everyone in the chain of command was killed, it is his duty to assume the chain of command. But he's not a commissioned officer. He's a private. But he's going to be called acting lieutenant. And he will be held accountable as if he was the lieutenant. So in the Army, people are very reluctant to assume the chain of command. But the thing is, if you don't, you can be court-martialed, because you have to do that to maintain the command structure. So I really took my experience from the Army and went, oh, it works here. So we're going to do that. So we formed the Council of Regency by necessity. It's called the Doctrine of Necessity, which is what they call the mother of all inventions, necessity. And we had to come up with a battle plan, 3 phases. And we had to keep in mind the limited amount of people that are involved. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Limited resources, a few dollars. Manpower, Okay, well, we got to do something. So we came up with this plan in light of all that. 3 phases. Phase 1, we need verification that the Hawaiian Kingdom continues to exist as an independent state, despite being occupied. So we need some international body to verify it exists. Not that we're saying it exists. And we're saying we're not a new state. We're saying we're the one from the 19th century. We're still here. It's just our government was overthrown, but we restored our government. So now it can speak. This Hawaiian Kingdom that was silent since 1893 is going to start talking in 1997 when we formed the Council of Regency. Once we get some international body to verify that existence, that continued existence, then we move to phase 2, exposure. That exposure is going to be Hawaiian statehood, to show why the Hawaiian Kingdom exists. What's the difference between the state of New York and the independent state of Belgium, right? Just like the points that you were bringing up, Kamaka. So we're going to expose. And that exposure is naturally going to move into compliance. Now that you know, now you got to do it. And if you don't do it, you got a war crime coming on you. And I'm the head of the Royal Commission of Inquiry, and our job is to investigate war criminals, and there's no statute of limitation. Just do your job. So it gets to a point where it's not a political rally. It's called just do what you're supposed to do.
So now that they know, it's like they're an accomplice.
The issue about war crimes. So you can commit a crime. That doesn't mean you're criminally culpable to be convicted for committing that crime. Meaning what you have to have is not just the act of the crime itself. Let's say usurpation of sovereignty. You are creating laws in the state of Hawaii illegally imposed here. Okay, that's a war crime. But the person can only be criminally culpable for prosecution if he has what is called the mens rea. Mens rea is the guilty mind. He knew that what he was doing was illegal and he still did it. See, now you met those elements of what we call in Latin actus reus, which is the act itself, and mens rea, the state of mind. Once you get those two, you can be prosecuted.
Okay, so it's 131 years since we've been illegally occupied.
Right.
So who would be in trouble? Like who would go to jail? Like what happens if somebody, I don't know, we prove all this and who's the one getting reprimanded?
So the thing is, it's not about trying to prove anything.
Okay.
Our phase 2 is to bring compliance to the law of occupation, not to prosecute people, bring compliance. But we couldn't move to that phase 2 until we get verification. And we got that from the Permanent Court of Arbitration.
When?
So in 1999, the Permanent Court of Arbitration verified Hawaiian Kingdom still exists.
Okay.
Okay. That was crucial. And that case lasted until February of 2001. But that body, that international body, reputable body, verified it. For us, Council of Regency, we move into phase 2.
Okay.
So now we have to be incremental on this. This is not just trying to prove a point. No, we have to fix the problem. We don't have to prove we're right, right? So we have to be deliberate and we got to be strategic and we got to be tactical. So within the phase 2 called exposure, we chose to approach it from an academic standpoint to begin that exposure. So that's when I entered the University of Hawaii in 2001 to get my master's degree in political science, specializing in international relations and law. And I'm going to start to bring in that information that the Hawaiian Kingdom still exists and we're occupied. And I'm going to go against the grain of everything that is being taught. Right?
And that's why you probably get pushback, right? Because...
Well, they can't deny the information. I mean, I never get into an argument with anybody. I just say, no, that's not factually correct.
Exactly. Did the Clinton Apology Act do nothing?
No.
Like, was it 93?
So let's take a look at what has happened up till today, which would include that apology, 1993, the apology resolution. So from 1898 till now, the United States Congress has been illegally imposing American law in Hawaii. One of those laws that they've been imposing is called the Statehood Act of 1959. Another law that they've been imposing is the Hawaiian Homes Act of 1921. Another law that they've been imposing, apology resolution. They're all illegal.
But they admitted it. Right?
Reading that apology resolution is riddled with misinformation because they apologize to natives as if it's a nationalist movement, just the native Hawaiians that we apologize to. And then they say the state of Hawaii exists, but you guys have to work together. Wait a minute, but the state of Hawaii was created by Congress, which is limited to U.S. territory. So basically what the apology resolution did was just add to the confusion
Oh.
and reinforce the idea of self-determination, tribal recognition, Native American, Akaka Bill. But yet all of that has nothing to do with anything because it's still an American law. It's a war crime.
Yeah.
So to actively use that, knowing that Hawaii's occupied and pushing that agenda, you got to be careful because now you're getting into that precipice, that cliff where, you got to stop calling it this. You got to stop making as if this is legal. It's not. We're talking about a country here, and the United States is a country. We're not talking about the natives are restless, but the federal government tends to feed that nationalism with federal grants, promotes research on colonization, and they keep reinforcing the bias, which adds to all the confusion. So for us in the Council of Regency, that is minuscule. It's irrelevant. We're at the apex of this situation. We're not down at the micro level, right? Because everything is going to come from the top down. And that apex here, right? This is the Hawaiian Kingdom, or is it the United States? That's all you got to answer.
Okay. And what phase are you in right now?
Phase 2.
Phase 2. So exposure. So this is perfect.
Exposure. And that exposure through the university system eventually led to exposing it in the court system where pleadings, now the judges are getting caught. In fact, one judge, Judge Hara, in circuit court in Hilo, sorry. I believe it was 2014 or 2015. He admitted on the record that if I accept this information, this is political suicide. This is an atomic bomb. Everything is going to evaporate. And then the point was, and you're a judge. Follow the law. Show the kingdom doesn't exist. You got no problem. They can't. They just hide behind it. So that power politics is now going to get people in trouble. So from 2001 at the university, I got to admit, we collectively have made some radical changes in the discourse where people are now talking occupation. People are now talking war crimes. It's becoming normalized. Not widespread, but it is changing.
Well, after this, that movement might get a little bigger.
And the movement is cerebral. It's all in our head.
Yeah.
So as the Council of Regency is implementing its operational plan through its strategy in phase 2, right, to bring compliance, it's a never-ending work of rebuilding or restoring Hawaiian national consciousness, not racial consciousness, national consciousness, the country. How did the government operate? What was a constitutional monarchy? Those issues have to be taught. We have to be retaught what our kupuna already knew. And we're using the same information they have as far as the curriculum. Yeah, you'll be amazed what they were learning in Lahaina Luna. It's pretty mind-blowing, right? So we need to still get to that point. But the Council of Regency can't wait till everybody wakes up. It has to always go towards who's the decision maker. And that decision maker today is the State of Hawaii Adjutant General. And that is that individual in charge of the Army and Air National Guard. So one particular rule on the law of occupation, right, is that the entity that is in control of territory of the occupied state is the one responsible for enforcing the laws of the occupied state. Now, why is that important? Because you cannot enforce laws with the bullhorn. You have to be able to send police out to physically enforce. So between the federal government and the state of Hawaii government, both United States, the state of Hawaii is in control of over 10,000 square miles. Okay? Federal government with the military is only in effective control of less than 500 square miles. So according to international law, that responsibility falls on the state of Hawaii and its apparatus, which that governmental infrastructure is from the Hawaiian Kingdom. All they did was hijack it from 1893.
And call it something else.
Exactly. That's why so few people could take over with military backing them up. It's just name change, right?
Yeah.
Same legislative branch, executive branch, judicial branch. So it's the state of Hawaii that has that responsibility. And that is the 2-star general, whoever that person is. But at this stage, it's a guy named Colonel Ken Hara.
Mhm.
He is the one responsible for transforming the state of Hawaii into military government, no different than what General MacArthur was responsible for transforming the civilian government of the Japanese into a military government to continue to administer Japanese law. Hara, or whoever that person is going to be there, needs to transform the state of Hawaii to begin to administer Hawaiian Kingdom law.
Wow. Okay. So you sent me a bunch of links and articles. I'm going to link it in the description just because we're running short on time. I was going to show it, but if you're listening to this, just go check it out in the show notes. But I've also been holding my pee for the longest I've ever done on this podcast because I'm so interested in this, but I'm going to take a minute shishi break and we'll be right back. What if we told you the next 3 times you fill your tank, you could save money? Well, at Texaco in Hawaii, it's true. You can get $1 off per gallon on your next 3 visits when you download the Texaco app and join Texaco Rewards. Earn points on every fuel transaction and qualifying in-store purchases at participating Texaco stations. Download the app and join to get started today. Visit TexacoHawaii.com for details. Okay, we're back from a quick shishi break. It's literally been like 1 minute and 15 seconds of real time, but we're right back. Okay, so I think what I just mentioned to you off the camera, we're definitely going to have to do a part 2 at some point because there's no way we can cover everything right now and you got to get somewhere. So I did want to get into the social media fan questions. But before that, I just want to ask you if you could clarify a Hawaiian. I think that's like one of the biggest things that we talk about on here. Like, what does it mean to be Hawaiian? And then you hear about like Hawaii national versus like Hawaiian by blood, Kanaka Maoli. So can you just tell us the difference between all of that?
Sure.
Quick?
Okay, so the term Hawaiian actually, Hawaiian is a short term for Hawaiian subject, like British is a short term for British subject. American is a short term for American citizen, right?
Okay.
So a Hawaiian, under Hawaiian law, is a nationality.
Okay.
So Sanford Dole, an insurgent, a traitor, he was an American, he was Hawaiian. He was a Hawaiian subject. He was a Hawaiian subject.
Okay.
Now, so a subject is a nationality within a monarchical system of government. Citizen is the nationality of a non-monarchical government like a republic, right? So Ben Franklin, before 1783, the Treaty of Peace was signed. He was British. After that treaty was signed, King George recognized them as separate. He went from being British to being an American citizen.
Okay.
Because citizen is republic, right? That's what the United States became, a republic when it used to be a crown colony or crown colonies. So that term, Hawaiian, is tied directly to the country, irrespective of race, color, or creed. Now, what you would refer to the native people of the country, right, in English and used in the Kingdom era and in its laws, you refer to natives as Aboriginal Hawaiian, both pure and part. So pure is Kanaka Maoli, part is Hapa. Now, in Bernice Powahi's will, this is a good indicator of how it was used. In her will, Article 13 says financial aid will be given to those Hawaiians of Aboriginal blood, pure or part. That means Hawaiians of Aboriginal, which means Aboriginals are not exclusively Hawaiian. You have non-Aboriginal who are Hawaiian, Caucasian, Mandarin, right?
So those are the mixed.
No, those are non-Aboriginal. So she
like
says,
non-native Hawaiian, like
yeah. So the word Aboriginal, by definition, means the first to arrive in a region. That's what it means. So when you refer to the Aborigines in Australia, that's not what they call themselves. Aborigines are saying these were the first people there. Now, they naturally call themselves something different in their own language, but that's what Aboriginal means, first to arrive in a region.
Okay, and that's different than native?
So the term native means born on that territory.
Okay.
So native would be your natural born by law. So a haole, let's say an American citizen born in the kingdom, like Sanford Dole, he was born in the kingdom, but he came from American parents. By being born in the kingdom, he's native born.
Native Hawaiian.
Native Hawaiian, which means
That's trippy.
he's a native Hawaiian subject.
It's crazy to think of it like that.
That's called natural born.
Okay.
That's what native born.
So Aboriginal Hawaiian is more Kanaka Maoli.
No. So Aboriginal Hawaiian is Aboriginal, but you might be part Haole or you might be pure back then.
Okay.
Okay. So Hawaiian, who is pure Aboriginal, is Kanaka Maoli. So if you look up Kanaka Maoli in the dictionary, America Vena Pukui's dictionary, it specifically says pure blood, right? Now, you can also be Hapa. You could be Hapa Kanaka Maoli. You know, not Hapa Kanaka Maoli, but Hapa Aboriginal, because you might be English, Irish. Like Queen Emma was Hapa. She was not Kanaka Maoli. She had British in her, or English.
Yeah.
Right? Like Ka'iolani, Princess Ka'iolani. She was Hapa, not Kanaka Maoli. But the term that is used in the native language to include both pure and not pure is Kanaka Oiwi. So that's a term that has been used in the native language to refer to that. But Kanaka Oiwi would be the English equivalent of Bernice Pauahi's will, called Hawaiians of Aboriginal blood pure apart.
Yeah. So we're using Kanaka Maoli incorrectly.
Yeah.
So when we're we're Kanaka Maoli.
So I'm not Kanaka Maoli.
That's just pure, 100%.
Yeah. America Vena Pukui's dictionary. It's in the census reports in the kingdom.
So we've been using Kanaka Maoli wrong.
Right.
We've been using Hawaiian wrong as well.
Yeah, because we're using Hawaiian as if it's ethnic.
As it's like
from Hawaiian Homes Act, from Hawaiian Homes Act. So under American law, native Hawaiian with a lowercase n ties to blood quantum, Hawaiian Homes. The apology law in 1993, Clinton, has the upper N, uppercase, native Hawaiian. That's anybody, both lower N and uppercase N, irrespective of blood quantum. But again, the point is, that's all American. That has nothing to do with the Hawaiian Kingdom and its laws.
Okay.
So when we start to use a lot of the terms that we're using, naturally we're using it from an American national consciousness. It only proves that we've been denationalized.
So what would like Lili'uokalani call herself?
She was a Hawaiian subject.
Hawaiian subject.
Well, no, not a Hawaiian subject, because she was queen.
Okay, then what is her ethnicity? Hawaiian.
From what I understand, she would be Kanaka Maoli.
Okay.
Yeah,
so Hawaiian never existed because it was just Kanaka Maoli, and they translated.
No, but the word Hawaiian is an English word. It's not. It's not a native word.
See, so that's why it didn't exist back then, because they just used the Hawaiian language.
They were bilingual, but they had the language was the national language, the native language, but you also had the English language. So the laws were in both native and English.
Okay.
When you see it throughout the 19th century.
Okay, so she called herself Kanaka Maoli, and other people would say Hawaiian subjects.
Well, see, back then it wasn't an issue of I'm Kanaka Maoli because I'm trying to be different.
This wasn't a conversation.
It wasn't an issue, exactly. Okay. It's like I got to prove I'm Hawaiian.
Yeah.
Okay, what kind of Hawaiian you?
Yeah. Nobody really asked that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's only now because that's part of the Hawaiian nationalism.
And scratching for our identity, trying to reclaim our. Okay.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. Okay, so we could talk about this even longer, but I want to get into the social media fan questions because we got some good ones, okay? First one comes from Pele_Kayao. This person says, if the U.S. was to deoccupy Hawaii today, what would the next year look like for Hawaii?
Okay, so what's important is I'm not a proponent of bringing the occupation to an end anytime soon. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Because according to the law of occupation, the United States has to clean up the mess that it created before they leave.
Okay.
So they have to begin to administer the laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom, meaning compliance with the law of occupation, which will eventually come to a treaty of peace where the occupation will come to an end and a transition economically, politically, all that stuff is going to be in that treaty. But in the meantime, our people have to be re-educated. This issue of Hawaiian national consciousness has to be implemented as a policy to counter denationalization that took place for 131 years. There's a lot of work that has to take place here to clean up this mess, before the United States come. It's not like, oh, the United States came to the luau, destroyed the whole place, and they want to go home. No, bro, you staying.
Yeah.
And you're going to pay for that. Let me get it appraised, right?
Okay.
Let me get some white papers done on this so that you can know exactly how much you're going to pay for reparations, compensation, and possible convictions for war crimes. All of that all comes into play, but it begins with understanding the apex of this situation. The country is here. That's the tip of the iceberg. That tip is not the United States. When our people see that, then the occupation will eventually come to an end. Until then, we're going to move from a frying pan to a boiling pot. And it's of our own making. And that's why it's important that it has to be methodical.
Yeah.
It has to be based on law, based on facts, not rhetoric, because we have to bring this situation to a conclusion. And it's called a remedial prescription. I'm there. I'm not one to rush. I just got to make sure it's done right. I remember my tutor used to tell me, when you start something, don't be kapulu. Because if you're going to be wasteful, don't even start.
Yeah.
When I started this, I accepted the fact that I'm not going to leave this place kapulu. It's going to be fixed.
You're going to leave it better than where you found it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I owe it to our kupuna who set it up for our people to benefit. I'm not doing this for our people.
Yeah.
No, I'm doing it for our kupuna who did it for us, but it benefits us.
As a way to honor them, but
Absolutely.
benefit us. Okay, beautiful. Okay, Brada.ash says, how has Hawaii been an example to other illegally occupied nations?
It's an example that we're the longest occupied state in the history of international relations. Oh, bar none. The point is, part of the exposure is not just exposing it here, but also internationally, because the world needs to see that, because they have treaties with us, and those treaties are still valid. But it's a process to bring that awareness on, and that's called phase 2. But through the exposure, both national and international, and the Permanent Court of Arbitration was that peg that was pounded in that nobody can pull out. The Hawaiian Kingdom still exists. Now it's just a matter of other countries latching onto that, because now we're thinking of economics, global economy. Then what is our economy? What is our political economy? How do we engage in trade? This is not the American economy. That was imposed on us. So each economy within a country is very different. Not everybody operates on the same type of capitalism. Very different. We had our own. So we have to get our people involved to know this and to understand it. Because by them taking over our schools and basically wiping the memory of school children, of their country, their national consciousness, they effectively replaced it with American national consciousness. That signifies a very important point that I have to respect: the power of education. What they did back then, they weaponized it. And it did major damage.
Totally.
But it does reveal the fact that it's still a power and we're going to use it right. And that's why our methodical approach on implementing our exposure phase was through the university, the educational system. That is how we're going to counter what was initiated initially in 1906.
Okay. So are we American? You know how you got the famous, Haunani K. Trask speech, like, we are not American, we are Hawaiian, we will die as Hawaiians. Are we legally, on paper, all Americans? I mean, on our passports, on our IDs, we're Americans.
Okay, so what Haunani was saying back then was not accurate.
Okay,
because she was coming from a colonial standpoint as a colonized people. So she's referring to the Americans as more the colonizer and the Hawaiians as the colonized. Right. And she was aligning herself with the American Indian movement and all that. That is not what American or Hawaiian means under the law. So American is a nationality, just like Hawaiian. So in the Hawaiian Kingdom, you can acquire Hawaiian nationality 3 ways: birth on a soil, native born, called native born. Okay. You can acquire it by applying for naturalization. It might be a time you have to reside, maybe 10 years, right? And then you can apply for citizenship. Or you can be born abroad in another country from parents that were Hawaiian subjects. Okay. The American system has the same rules applied, those 3 ways. right? So for a Hawaiian family to travel to California in 1880, give birth in Orange County to a child, that child is American by birth, Hawaiian by parentage. That's a dual citizen.
Mm.
Okay. So in the Hawaiian Kingdom, anybody born in the Hawaiian Kingdom from foreign parents are Hawaiian by birth, but French, American by parentage.
Very interesting.
So when you look at, let's say, for myself, so my great-grandfather, Henry Keanu Reeves, came from Tennessee, married my great-grandmother, Rose. That's how we got Kuli'o'o. He was American, married my great-grandmother, who was Hawaiian. My papa, Henry Keanu Reeves, was American Hawaiian by nationality. That's not a choice. That's just an outcome, right? And then that American citizenship would continue down to me. Now, the only time that American citizenship would stop is under American law if you swore allegiance to a foreign country, a government. I swore allegiance to the Hawaiian Kingdom because I'm a member of the Council of Regency. I'm not American under American law. I'm Hawaiian. I'm a Hawaiian subject.
Okay.
So the idea of nationality is not one of choice, but of circumstance. Then it's your choice if you want to lose it or retain it.
Okay.
But each country has their own rules that you got to follow to maintain, their nationality.
Okay. So for example, I like technically dual citizen, American and Hawaiian subject.
Yeah.
Okay. But if I were to claim like what you did, then I wouldn't be American anymore.
So give you an example, not to use the Hawaiian Kingdom, but let's say you joined the French Foreign Legion.
Okay.
And you took an oath of allegiance to France. Under American law, you gave up your American citizenship. You became French.
Okay.
But you're also Hawaiian.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
All right. So
because nationality is based on allegiance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pledge allegiance to the flag.
Well, that's denationalization.
I never learned that. I went to Hawaiian immersion school. Okay. Next question comes from Keakelani and Kaloa Robinson. They want to know, has he caught any more pigs while golfing? That's my parents. That's my mom and stepdad.
Yeah, I know. There was only that one time, but I had fun. And when I grabbed that pig, it was squealing so loud. And that was at a Kamehameha reunion golf tournament.
Yes. He just told me about that. And then I was on the phone with my mom this morning and they were just talking about that. So yeah, they had to leave that question. Okay. Next question comes from my brother, Kuakaloa_Robinson. He says, what would you say is the biggest problem within our lahui?
I don't like to say there's a problem. I think there's a lack of awareness. There's a lack of education. And what people are expressing is revealing just that. There is a olelo no'eau that refers to the kahui vai, the water gourd. So the way the olelo no'eau goes is the water gourd, look like a canteen, right? And it has a cork, which is a shell, and you have water in it. And that's what you take on the boat, on the wakaulua, hiking in the mountains or whatever. So the way the olelo no'eau goes is that the gourd with a little bit of water, sorry. Let me start again. So the gourd represents the person, and water in the gourd represents knowledge. The gourd with a little bit of water makes the most noise when you shake it. So when you hear swishing, which is not knowing, and you're expressing it, fill the gourd with more water. Because once you fill the gourd with a lot of water, you don't swish a lot.
That's like the loudest drum is the emptiest.
Yeah,
something
exactly.
Like that. And that's why I said the minority is always the loudest.
Yeah,
on social media.
Yeah.
Okay. Very, very, very interesting. So, can you debunk this thing? You hear it all the time. If America didn't come in over to Hawaii, it would have been Japan. It would have been somewhere else. True or false?
Well, let me respond that to what they call in psychology the battered wife syndrome.
What is that?
So the battered wife syndrome is, I used to be a social worker.
Okay.
So the battered wife syndrome is that the wife gets beaten all the time. And what she tends to do to survive is to justify the beating. I'm just glad that this husband is beating me and not somebody else. That's not healthy. You're not supposed to be thinking like that. It's another version of what is also called the Stockholm syndrome.
That's what I was thinking of.
That's like the battered wife syndrome, where the people taken hostage in the bank in Stockholm were buying into, well, they needed to do this to me. So it's more of justifying and not necessarily understanding. But aside from that, that Stockholm situation, that's still a criminal. And he got arrested and he got convicted. Now the person who was there got to go through psychological therapy, psychiatry, whatever the case is, because it is traumatic. There's no doubt. So when somebody says, oh, somebody else would have come, but that's not how it works. Do you have evidence they're coming? Then I'll prepare for that. It's like saying, you know what? A tsunami's coming.
It's hypotheticals.
It's all hypothetical.
Yeah, and we're here just talking facts.
Yeah. And when I was in the Army, you don't go with hypothetical because you could have been infiltrated by some wrong intel from the opposing side to get you to walk into the kill zone.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to know. All right. Last question. And we have about 15 minutes. Okay. So we'll kind of rush through these. The last 15 minutes. Loa _ that one guy says, what's currently happening right now in the Hawaiian Kingdom?
Well, the one thing that's happening is exposure. People are beginning to talk. The situation of Hawaii being occupied and war crimes and accountability has to be normalized. But as far as critical action that is taking place right now, July 31st is coming up. And that is in the Army we state it's called a suspense date, meaning something's going to happen. So General Hara has until 12 noon on July 31st to delegate his full authority to his deputy, Brigadier General Logan, to establish a military government. That's what he's supposed to do. And I've already worked with General Hara. He has been fully briefed on this. His JAG officer already verified everything. Oh, it's all there. It's just a matter of do your job. Because he already announced he's going to retire. Well, you got to delegate that authority and then you step out. If he doesn't, then he's going to be the subject of a war criminal report that's going to be published. And he will be prosecuted when that time comes.
Yes, and check out that link in the description below.
Now that leads to the next step. Brigadier General Logan will have to assume a chain of command and within 1 week establish that military government. If he doesn't, he becomes the subject of a war criminal report being published. Then that moves to the chain of command, going right down the Army chain of command. Colonel Hatcher, 29th Infantry Brigade. He will have 1 week to do what he's supposed to do. And it's going to happen. Just a domino effect. A sequence of events that will have profound ramifications for the entire Army Guard and its command structure. All because senior leadership failed to perform their duty.
So why July 31st? What's the significance of that? I'm sure a lot of us know, but for the people that don't.
So July 31st, that day is very significant in the Hawaiian Kingdom because in February of 1843, Lord Paulette arrived in these islands under the reign of Kamehameha III as a constitutional monarch and was alleging that British subjects' rights were being violated. And he demanded to take over. And Kamehameha III was forced to yield his authority pending the outcome of his envoy securing Hawaiian independence, which will eventually come in November of that same year, yield that authority to Lord Paulette. And he ran Hawaii, the Hawaiian Kingdom, under British rule. Admiral Thomas from Valparaiso in South America, the British port, sailed to Hawaii because he heard of what happened. And he basically ordered Lord Paulette to leave. And he entered into an agreement with Kamehameha III that his law and governments, his ea, will be returned, right? And that's why we have July 31st, Restoration Day. So here we have American law has been illegally imposed here, like Lord Paulette. Back then it was only a few months. We're talking 131 years. It has to bring back that. It has to acknowledge that ea, the military government to administer Hawaiian Kingdom law to prepare for transition. That's how it's supposed to happen, because that is a significant day for this to occur. But it's also the day that's going to start a chain of events that's going to have some major ramifications.
Yeah. Where hopefully the result would be in the ho'i of our ea. The return of sovereignty.
Well, not return of sovereignty.
Or-
So back then, Ea was not regarded as sovereignty. Ea was like the life, the breath of the king, like the Ea.
Yeah.
Everything.
That's what another
Exactly. Right, because sovereignty is manaki ekie, right? But Ea is that essence, that it's the chiefs, what they do. So that is what Commandment the Third gave up. He wasn't fluent in international law in 1843. He was operating as a king, right? Yeah. So when Lord Polek gave him back that Ea, that's what he had. But Hawaii did not have its sovereignty recognized as being independent until November 28, which is a few months later. But this was the restoration of Ea. Well, that's what we have to bring. So in a sense, the Ea here, I say, is collectively our national consciousness.
Cool.
That is going to be restored.
Super cool. All right. Well, mahalo everybody for the social media fan questions. Make sure you leave some for our next guest, and maybe a question will make it on the podcast. All right. So we're coming to the back end of the podcast, and I like to ask all of my guests the meaning of keeping it aloha. In your life, how do you keep it aloha?
Be humble, be mindful, be respectful. We are who we were. And how I approach things in knowing we are who we were is that the practical value of history is that it's a film of the past run through the projector of today onto the screen of tomorrow. That film never changes. We just got to update the projector to process more film. Now we see a bigger future. In that future, now we grab our kuleana, whatever that kuleana is, with aloha. And I call it aloha aina.
Patriotism.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. What is one thing you wish people knew about you that they don't?
I'm just a dad. I'm a papa. I wear so many different hats. But I'm a Hawaiian patriot. Bottom line. And I'm not one to go out and talk. I mean, a lot of people even think I'm on social media. I'm not. I don't even have a Facebook. I Gmail, but I'm thankful that the social media has been, when I give presentations, people film it and they put it up. Thanks to Commitment Schools for doing that. For even the government, when I give presentations, to, like say the Maui County Council, so I want to make sure that what I do is my work will be for our people. Because I want my granddaughter and my grandson to go, that's my papa. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. I'm sure they will. I think you're already making your mark, and hopefully after this, it'll be even bigger and more exponential. Okay, so before we end the podcast, I got to know, what is your life hack?
My what?
Your life hack.
My life?
Your life hack.
Hack?
Yeah.
What is that?
It's like something that makes your life easier, something that you use in your life. It could be something physical. It could be like a mindset thing. It could be just like words of advice.
Gee, I don't know how to respond to that.
That's why I have people prepared before.
Yeah, I didn't even know what a mind hack was.
Life hack.
Life hack. Sorry.
Yeah. That's what Google's for.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna go Google it after this.
Okay. How about this? We'll have you on again in the future. You gotta prepare your life hack, and then you share it with us next time.
No problem.
Okay. So, where we gotta close because we gotta get you out of here. What is like the last thing you want to share with us, that like something that people should take home from this?
Believe in your past. Don't believe in your future, because it never happened. So in that past is the mo'olelo. And in that mo'olelo, you capitalize on successes, you learn from mistakes. And I like to say, nobody's wrong. Nobody's wrong. We're just temporarily off track. Just get back on track. So it's a matter of helping each other get back on track, because what we have here is 131 years of a travesty. And it's not gonna last longer than how it has. And I'm not gonna allow our country to be compromised any more than it has been, even if it has been compromised by our own people. I will hold them to account, because our issue here is the country, not ourselves. And that is part of what is patriotism. What is for the country, not what is it for you, but what can you do for your country? What is your kuleana? I say maximize kuleana. Just maximize it. Whatever you are, be better at it. You're a police officer, you're the best police officer you are. Know that it's a Hawaiian Kingdom, and we had constables back then in the Kingdom era. You're a police officer in the Kingdom. You're an Army, you're in the Army National Guard, guess what? You're in the King's Guard. Because they hijacked the name, called it National Guard 1893. No, that's the King's Guard by statute. You're a Hawaiian soldier. Be the best that you can be. So we have to be able to be better at who we are, given our circumstance. The most important occupation that I see today, teachers, education at every level. So important. Maximize it. Teach the children how to be a Hawaiian. National consciousness is the key. So in the Army, we would say, because training was everything. Because you fight how you've trained, and you train how you're going to fight, right? Because you never know when that balloon's going to go up and you got to go to war, right? You don't go, oh shit, now I got to prepare. So training was always part of it. So train the soldiers. But before we would train the soldiers, we had to train the trainers. Train the trainers first. And that's what we're doing at the University of Hawaii.
Awesome. And people can sign up and take your class, right?
Train the trainers.
Awesome. Are you on the more radical side where it's like you don't want to do anything American, like you try to do only Hawaiian things? Or because I know people like that.
When I teach political science, I teach political science across the board for any country. See, the best way to actually understand our situation is to understand other situations throughout the world.
Some people, like, we have people that they're like, no, I don't care about that. I don't even care about Hawaiian history. I don't care about like doing Hawaiian things.
Yeah, well, doesn't matter. It's just that person's temporary belief.
Okay.
Yeah, because it goes beyond that. But see, again, it goes back to that the cultural wars. It goes back to Hawaiian nationalism. Like they're trying to be, I'm Hawaiian.
That's not the goal of this.
Okay, so I'm going to make a joke. Maybe we'll close with a joke.
Yeah, totally.
So I say this a few times just to kind of rattle some Hawaiians. I say, hey, you got 3 types of Hawaiians today. Really? Yeah, 3 types. You got those that are less than 50%. They kind of get Hawaiian homes. Then you get those that are more than 50%. They get Hawaiian homes. And then you get those that are 200%. That's the uehe and slide Hawaiian, take it easy, stop trying to prove you're Hawaiian. And all 3 are irrelevant because a Hawaiian is a Hawaiian subject, but that was an American joke.
If you get it, you get it. Right on. Okay, so I just have my last fast fave 5 questions. These are just rapid fire answers, okay? Favorite guilty pleasure?
Red wine.
Oh, nice. Favorite country you've been to?
Switzerland.
Oh, beautiful. Favorite hobby?
Boxing.
Oh, nice. Do you watch MMA, boxing, stuff like that? Yeah. Awesome.
I like boxing more, but I like MMA as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Favorite way to recharge?
Relax. Have a cigar with some scotch.
Fancy. Okay, and then your favorite book?
My favorite book would have to be Kalaka's book, Legends and Myths of Hawaii.
I gotta keep an eye out for that.
Yeah.
Okay, right on. Well, that's all we have for you today. I wish we had like 3 more hours to talk about all this. So we'll definitely get you back on at some point. Mahalo so much for sharing all your ike with us. Is there anything you want to share with us before we wrap up? If not, tell us where we can find you.
Well, I'm busy, so people may send me emails, but I don't have time to respond because I have so many things happening at this time. But people can visit hawaiiankingdom.org/blog. And that's where they get all updated information of what's going on. If you want to take classes that I teach, enroll at the University of Hawaii, and you can check, what are the courses that are being offered. So I do that as well.
Okay, right on. We'll go check it out. And like I said, all the links will be inside of the description below. Mahalo, Keanu, for joining us on the Keep It Aloha podcast. Spread love, be kind to one another, and mahalo for listening to us today. We have new episodes every Thursday, so make sure you follow us and leave a review. I'm your host, Kamaka. Remember to always keep it aloha.